Alright, so since it was a hectic ending to the regular season, I've decided to combine both For the Cap 24 and For the Cap 25 into this video, and there's a lot that needs to be talked about here now that the Warriors have officially punched their ticket into the playoffs. We gotta talk about Moses Moody, because he's the starter on this team officially now, and now that he has consistent rotation minutes, that's gonna come with consistent expectations if the Warriors are truly trying to win a title. Most Warrior fans are not going to like this. They're not going to like what I'm about to say because they treat Moody like he's some game changer. But in reality, he's not ready to contribute to a big playoff run. I've mentioned numerous times that Moody is a raw basketball player. And if you don't know what that means, it means he has basic deficiencies as a basketball player that affects his ability to play meaningful minutes. In this case, there's two big things about Moody that make him a raw basketball player in year 4. 1. He's a very weak ball handler. He's not somebody who can bring the ball up for the Warriors that can run offense. He's strictly an off-ball player. He scores off of spot-up opportunities like catch and shoot, closeout attacking. Things like that are generally his bread and butter. But as soon as you throw him the ball and you run a ball screen for him, he can't create shots for himself or the team. He struggles to dribble drive past his matchup or pull up over a defender. But he's a second side action dribble handoff type of player, or an off-ball screen or a baseline cut type of player. Point is, he can't handle the ball, like at all. 2. With Moody playing off the ball, he's likely playing off of an advantage, meaning he's going to have scoring opportunities where people fly at him at the 3-point line. In those situations, you gotta make quick decisions. Steph talked about this before. It's called the 0.5. Either shooting, passing, or driving, whatever the case may be, you have to make a decision within 0.5 seconds. If you take longer than that, you allow the defense to recover. And the Warriors are generally trying to play a fast-paced offense in the half court. Moody can lose closeouts where he's indecisive about whether or not he wants to shoot or drive. He can't read the space that's being given to him. Like if a defender is closing out to him hard, he'll choose to shoot instead of attacking. And if a defender is closing out to him soft, he might choose to attack instead of shoot. He doesn't even look to swing the ball quickly as well if he doesn't make a quick decision to score. He can have some real ball stopper like possessions where he doesn't know what he wants to do and then everything just resets. Generally speaking, if you watch the way he's moving on the court, he needs a beat to do everything. A beat to shoot, a beat to put the ball in the deck, a beat to make the right play. And that's not gonna work. Even on post-entry passes, he'll take too long to throw the pass, or he's just not a good enough passer to throw passes on a tough passing angle. Playing in the system, you have to make good decisions off of game speed processing, and Moody is still struggling in that aspect, which is one of the reasons why Steve Kerr hesitated for so long to commit to Moses Moody. And against the best teams in the world, Moody is going to have a hard time doing the things that he's not comfortable doing, and it's gonna get ugly when he can't do what he already has to do on top of that. Right now, he's in a shooting slump. He's shooting 30% in his last 13 games. That's abysmal. And if you really think about it, Moody is just a longer and more athletic Nick Batum. He does everything and plays exactly like Nick Batum, except he can do more things because he's a better athlete. And Nick Batum isn't even a starter, so that should tell you a lot about where Moody is at right now. The Warriors defense has to be better at closing out behind the help. The Warriors are the #1 team at defending the rim in both frequency and efficiency. I'm not even lying, look it up. And if you're confused as to why that's the case, even though the Warriors are such a small team, it's because they're help dependent. Their POA defense is toast, so they end up having to trap the box and sink down much more often. But when you do that, your defense is in rotation where there's one guy that's splitting the difference against 2 other players on the weak side. Usually the main objective here is that there needs to be an X out. So the player guarding 2 rotates to the ball, and the player sinking down needs to rotate to the other player. Or the player at the top of the key can rotate 1 pass away. Either way, there needs to be multiple closeouts to compensate for your help. If not, then you're just allowing high quality 3-point looks. And that has been happening to the Warriors. Guys are just too lazy to close out, or they're just late. Do this in the playoffs, and you're going to get sent to Cancun packing, because with how the Warriors defense is constructed relative to their issues, they almost have to fly around and defend on a string. They can't stop penetration at the POA. Yeah, we have great help side defenders in Jimmy and Dre, but they also have their own issues, and they can only do so much. It's now to the point where it's everybody has to do their job, because no matter how great this defense is, according to statistics, they can get picked apart very easily with bad habits like this. Podz had a very good stretch of games this week, and the main thing that stuck out to me is his spot-up scoring. I've mentioned so many times that ever since Jimmy came to the Warriors, guys like Podz and Moody have been playing better because they're playing off of Jimmy. Podz has been scoring off of spot-up looks tremendously. Catch and shoot, off-ball cuts, relocations, he's been doing it all in that aspect. Early in the season, he wasn't even attempting any of these looks. However, The fact that he's consistently taking these type of looks and scoring efficiently is a good sign that indicates that he's confident in that side of his scoring. But his on-ball creation has always been an issue. He's always had issues scoring in the pick and roll and pulling up and getting downhill. So it's almost like he belongs in the same category as Moody, except he's much more polished and a smarter basketball player. But in the Denver game, Podz was scoring very well off of ball screens and getting to his in-between game much more. The mid-range pull-up was sensational. He was calmly stepping into them and releasing at the top of his shot. He was also getting great lift on it, and these are the type of shots that Podz has to take and make. Especially if Steph is having an off night or Jimmy decides that he just wants to pass the ball. He has to trust his mid-range game because he has a good foundation for it. Most teams will not play any other coverage other than a drop against him. He's also likely dealing with the third best defender as well. This is really where Podz can actually take a leap and place himself as a definitive third option alongside Steph and Jimmy. Out of all the young players, Podz, Moody, Kuminga, he's the one that's actually making the most progress when it comes to taking that next step. The Clipper game pissed me off like crazy, and there were a ton of things that pissed me off. I didn't like some of the coverages that we were running against Kawhi in the second half of the game. I didn't like how we weren't funneling ball handlers into the help side off of Chris Dunn. I didn't like how we didn't do anything to stop dribble penetration other than dropping into a zone. But the one thing that pissed me off more than anything is losing on the margins. Missing defensive rebounds and losing loose balls heavily killed the Warriors' momentum in this game. There were several stretches during the game where the Warriors failed to get a rebound, and that led to extra scoring opportunities for the Clippers, which they converted. Last FortiCap video, I said the Warriors desperately need to win margins against other teams because they aren't the most talented roster or the best half-court offense in the league. But if you allow other teams to dominate the area that you should ideally control because you have so many players that can contribute to it, you're going to lose no matter how good Steph and Jimmy are. And this is where I'm pissed about QP in his minutes, because Jimmy is carrying the offense, so you can't expect him to get on the glass per usual, so that means these other guys have to chime in and get a rebound. There was literally a possession where Post was underneath the basket, and he just threw his hands up and expected the ball to fall into his hands. Post is way too weak of a rebounder to give him consistent playoff minutes. He gets out-rebounded way too easily. It's a shame because he's a 7-footer. If he gets a board, it'll help him tremendously because he can pass it to a guard, and he can run it down the floor quickly. That's either going to force one of two things to happen. Either A, you get a clean scoring look against a defense that isn't set, or B, it forces the opposing center to sprint back into the paint to protect the rim. If that ends up happening, guess what? You've got Quentin Post trailing from behind, and they can easily kick it to him at the 3-point line above the break, with the center being stuck into the paint. That's how he got a couple of trailing 3-point looks against the Grizzlies, because he was able to get a rebound, or the team was able to rebound. I'm telling you guys right now, this upcoming offseason, Post has to work on his vertical athleticism and being a better rebounder. That's first on the list before anything else. That Spurs loss was diabolical. It was the reason why the Warriors had to go through the play-in. And one of the things that frustrated me the most in that game was late game execution. Down the stretch of that game, the Warriors had two issues. They were force-feeding Steph the ball, and they didn't involve Steph and Jimmy together enough. Steph is obviously the system of this team, and everything should absolutely run through him. However, when Steph can't receive the ball, and you're wasting precious time off the clock, you can't just continue to get him the ball by any means necessary. There's gotta be some sort of improvisation or second side action, because trying to desperately get Steph the ball will ruin the flow of the offense. On top of that, I quite frankly didn't understand why they were running off-ball plays for Steph. They were trying to get him the ball off of a pin down, staggers, and gut screens, and it was just dumb. Point blank period. Each team has its own offensive schemes that they'll run throughout the game. However, in crunch time, the only quote-unquote scheme that should happen is that the ball needs to be in your best player's hands, and they need to create. You don't play like how you did for 3.5 quarters in the last half of the final quarter of the game. It just doesn't work like that. Look at Denver. Everything runs through Jokic as a hub and Jamal Murray as a ball handler, but down the stretch of games, what you'll see is that Jamal Murray and Jokic will frequently play a two-man game. I just don't understand why the Warriors didn't run like empty side actions for Jimmy and Steph. That's either going to get Steph and Jimmy a positional advantage, or one of them is going to draw two on the ball. And at that point, either somebody gets a shot, or they make the right read and somebody else gets a shot. If not, then they have favorable matchups that they can attack. It's literally the easiest thing to do, yet they make it seem so much more complicated than what it needs to be. And the decision making and the ball handling execution were so bad that also didn't help as well. But they did get it right in the play-in game against Memphis, where they put Jimmy and Steph on the ball, and they even ran some sort of two-man action involving each other. That should be what the Warriors need to run in late game execution, not some motion bullcrap. You can even involve Draymond in it as well. And one last thing, Jimmy needs to understand that he's a part of this system as well. He took what he said in his introductory press conference a little too seriously, where he said pass Steph the ball and get out the way. He needs to understand that he's one half of the system. If Steph doesn't have a shot, then you need to shoot. Don't just look at the rim and try to hand it off to Steph. Look for your own offense. The sooner that these two and Steve Kerr realize that it can just be this simple in a clutch situation, the easier life will be for the Warriors and their fan base.